Our top focus tonight on Gravitas comes from West Asia. We're talking about those grand statements that were delivered just yesterday on the US brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. And 24 hours later, where do things stand? We are getting you up to speed with the developments of the day and what's happening on the ground and the big questions hanging in the air. Is the Israeli Prime Minister appearing to derail US President Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire deal? Is he itching for a return of the war? Is Netanyahu trying to do that? We're getting you up to speed with all of that in just a bit. Also on the show for you tonight, will Donald Trump be able to turn years of war and those sanctions into peace with Iran? That's the big question. We're decoding all of that for you. Also getting you the latest on the Russia-Ukraine war. A lot happening on the battlefield. Where are things headed? All this and more coming your way. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appears to be derailing US President Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire deal, signaling a possible push for the return of the war. Netanyahu has now set a new deadline for Hamas to return the bodies of the Israeli hostages, a move that threatens the continuity of the diplomatic breakthrough. Amid the fragile first phase of the ceasefire, Israel's military says it opened fire in northern Gaza to remove what it called a threat from suspects approaching its forces. The Palestinian health authorities reporting that at least 6 people were killed by the Israeli military in 2 separate incidents. While the IDF said 5 Palestinian suspects were killed, the Israeli military said these individuals crossed into a restricted area that had been part of Israel's initial pullback. A violation, it says, of the US brokered ceasefire agreement. Hamas, on the other hand, accused Israel's military of violating the ceasefire deal by killing Palestinians in Gaza. In the latest, Israel has decided not to reopen the Rafah border crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt tomorrow, as well as limit the aid flowing into Gaza until Hamas returns the bodies of all the dead hostages. Very crucial developments. And as per the Israeli media reports, Israel setting the end of today as the hard deadline for Hamas to make progress when it comes to returning the bodies of the dead hostages. The mediators reportedly saying that Hamas may not even know where all the bodies are, while the Red Cross said the process is expected to take some time. Israel's public broadcaster reporting that Netanyahu's government believes Hamas already has some of the bodies in its custody and is deliberately holding them back. A source familiar with the talks telling it that Israel lacks effective leverage on this issue, suggesting that Netanyahu's hardline approach may have more to do with political optics than diplomatic strategy. In fact, an Arab diplomat involved in the mediation told the Israeli newspaper Haaretz that mediators are working on the issue, while insisting that the overall Gaza agreement remains intact for now. Hamas handed over caskets set to contain the bodies of 4 dead hostages yesterday, but reportedly offered no information about 24 other dead hostages. For Trump, this comes at a rather delicate point. Just yesterday, remember, he was seen celebrating that high-profile peace signing in Egypt. A ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas, hailed as a personal diplomatic triumph.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו. The US president, who has long campaigned for a Nobel Peace Prize, basked in the global spotlight as world leaders gathered to endorse his framework. But the honeymoon, as many have called it, appears to be ending rather quickly. Analysts saying Trump's challenge now is keeping Netanyahu in line. Presidents from Bill Clinton to Joe Biden, remember, have struggled to manage the Israeli leader, and even Trump's own aides have privately complained reportedly that some of Netanyahu's military actions undercut American policy goals. And this month, Trump managed to push Netanyahu to accept that 20-point peace plan, but Netanyahu's right-wing coalition partners, including the National Security Minister and Finance Minister, have slammed the ceasefire deal, calling it a surrender. Ben-Gvir, in fact, has even threatened to quit the government in protest, adding further pressure on Netanyahu to appear uncompromising, especially as elections are due in Israel next year. On the ground, meanwhile, Gaza remains in ruins, the United Nations estimating that 92% of the residential buildings are damaged or destroyed. 92%. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians still living in tents, makeshift shelters. Trump's peace plan risks unraveling and also Netanyahu's deadline on dead hostages. Israeli military actions could be the spark that sends the deal up in flames, perhaps. Shifting focus for now, can Donald Trump turn years of war and sanctions into peace with Iran? Now, with the Gaza ceasefire in place, that is the big question coming out of West Asia. US President Donald Trump addressed the Israeli parliament yesterday, remember, fresh off his claimed victory in Gaza. Trump extended an olive branch, not to a friend, but to America's arch enemy, Iran. A remarkable feat, as just months ago, America and Iran seemed to be on the brink of war. And yet, here is the President of the United States offering, in his words, a hand of friendship. And in his remarks to the Israeli parliament on Monday, Trump, who has just early this year dropped bombs on Iran's nuclear facilities, said, and I'm quoting here, "We are ready when you are. The hand of friendship and cooperation is open. They want to make a deal. It would be great if we could make a deal," quote unquote. But despite this dovish rhetoric, the Trump administration has maintained a hard line against Iran. So the big question still is, how will the years of war, conflict, sanctions be turned into lasting peace? And can it? Because the path to better US-Iran ties remains fraught with challenges. In fact, the Israeli and US attacks in June, which came as nuclear negotiations between Washington and Tehran were ongoing, undermines advocacy for diplomacy in Iran. And while Iran itself has not closed the door to diplomacy, its leaders have not exactly rushed to renew talks with America either. Talks over Iran's nuclear program have also not resumed since the Trump administration's bombing of the Iranian nuclear facilities. Israel started the war in June, remember, days before the US and Iranian officials were set for another round of those talks. During a TV interview on Saturday, the Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs said, and I'm quoting here, "If we receive a reasonable, balanced and fair proposal from the Americans for negotiations, we will certainly consider it," quote unquote. And Iran was also not present in the Gaza summit, remember, that took place in Egypt. Tehran had rejected Egypt's invitation, citing US attacks and sanctions. The US, which during Trump's first term in 2018 withdrew from a previous deal limiting Iran's nuclear program, has also insisted that any new agreement, including a total ban on Iranian uranium enrichment. And that demand basically goes beyond the original deal, known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which only curbed Iran's uranium enrichment program under a strict international inspection system. And Tehran is not okay with these new sets of demands from the US. Iran has depicted that new demand as a denial of its rights as a sovereign country, noting that the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons does not prohibit uranium enrichment. And so this deadlock over enrichment has become a sticking point in the negotiations between the US and Iran. And that is why observers are saying that as long as the Trump administration insists on zero enrichment, Tehran will most probably not agree to a deal with America. And then there's the question of America's ally, Israel. Remember, the June conflict was not just with America, it also involved Israel, America's ally. And Israel's war with Iran included Israel's assassination of high-level military figures and civilian nuclear scientists, and airstrikes that killed hundreds of people reportedly. It is fresh memory for Tehran, of course. It increased skepticism about the prospects of a lasting deal with the US. And just yesterday, in a speech to the Israeli parliament, Benjamin Netanyahu lauded the US decision to bomb Iran during the war as a biblical miracle. And since the beginning of the war in Gaza, Israel has struck a series of blows against Iran and allied groups like the Hezbollah. Trump often reiterates that Iran's nuclear program has been obliterated by the US strikes on key facilities. But the extent of the damage remains unclear. The Pentagon said earlier this year that the Iranian nuclear program had been set back by 1 to 2 years, but International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA's chief, had said that Iran could be enriching uranium again within months. And Iran insists that it is not seeking a nuclear weapon. Meanwhile, Israel is widely believed to possess an undeclared nuclear arsenal. Iran is already angry with the IAEA for not condemning the strikes against its nuclear facilities by the US and Israel reportedly. So as far as Iran is concerned, there are pretty much zero reasons to trust America. And that goes for Washington as well. There is no upside here for Trump in resuming those talks without Iran making concessions. So where does that leave us? Trump laid his cards on the table, but years of war, sanctions, airstrikes, assassinations have basically left behind scars that will not heal overnight, of course. And with zero enrichment still on the table, trust between Tehran and Washington at a low point, any deal, if it comes, will be hard-fought, tenuous, and also fraught with major risks. West Asia and the world will be watching these developments very closely. The Russia-Ukraine war continues to intensify meanwhile, with major strikes reported on both sides. A large oil terminal in Crimea caught fire after an overnight drone attack, while Russian airstrikes hit Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. Both countries targeting critical energy infrastructure as winter approaches, signaling a rather dangerous phase in this war, which is now entering its fourth year. With flames and smoke rising over the oil terminal in Crimea after a series of explosions, satellite images from NASA's fire tracking system confirmed intense heat signatures across the site. A Ukrainian intelligence source told Reuters that drones operated by Ukraine's security service and military special forces struck at least 5 oil reservoirs. The same source said additional drones hit 2 electrical substations elsewhere on the peninsula. And Crimea's governor confirmed the fire but did not specify the damage. Feodosia has faced repeated attacks in recent weeks. Since August, in fact, Ukraine has carried out more than 30 drone and missile strikes on Russian energy facilities, part of what the officials in Kiev call a campaign to disrupt Moscow's fuel supply lines before winter. And in response, Russian forces launched fresh strikes on Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. Guided bombs damaged a hospital, severed power lines, and left around 30,000 homes and businesses without electricity. And the local mayor has said the explosions shattered windows and injured at least 4 people, mostly from flying glass. Some patients were moved to other wards as emergency teams worked to restore the services. Firefighters in the northeastern Ukrainian city of Sumy, meanwhile, could also be seen extinguishing a fire sparked by a Russian strike on a non-residential building in the early hours of the morning. Energy and power infrastructure have increasingly become central targets in recent weeks, both sides trying to weaken the other's ability to sustain the war effort through the colder months. Last week, missile and drone attacks across Ukraine cut power to over 1 million customers and disrupted water supplies in several parts, including Kiev. On the ground, Russian forces continue to advance. Russia's defense ministry announcing that its troops had taken control of a village in the Donetsk region. A day earlier, the Russian defense ministry also said that its forces had captured another village near Kupiansk in northeastern Ukraine and another in Donetsk region, consolidating positions along the front line. On the diplomatic front, meanwhile, US President Donald Trump said he hopes to help end the war, adding that peace would have been possible under his administration. Listen to this.
Had the election of 2020 not been rigged, you would have millions of people living just in Russia, Ukraine alone. That would have never happened. And it didn't happen for 4 years. And I knew Putin very well. It was the apple of his eye. All the things I've said would have never happened. We had an incompetent administration.
In fact, Trump also reiterated that the Turkish president could play a pivotal role in ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. The Kremlin responded by welcoming Trump's interest in pursuing peace following the ceasefire in Gaza. The Ukrainian president has announced plans to visit the United States this week. He said he will be discussing new military aid packages, including potential long-range missile systems like the Tomahawks. Zelensky added that he expects to meet Trump later in the week and will also hold talks with the U.S. defense and energy companies and members of the Congress. As winter nears, both Moscow and Kiev appear determined to gain advantage, be it on the battlefield, in the skies, or at the negotiating table.
I would like to nominate this great president for Nobel Peace Prize.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is at it once again, laying on praise for US President Donald Trump with almost no restraint. On Monday, speaking in Egypt alongside Trump, Sharif announced his intention to nominate the US president for the Nobel Peace Prize again. For the second time. In fact, Pakistan is putting Trump forward for the award. The first nomination came just months ago, remember, after Trump falsely claimed that he played a role in securing a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. And now Sharif says Trump deserves the Nobel for his role in the Gaza ceasefire, claiming he has saved millions of lives across West Asia. The Pakistan Prime Minister's praise was on full display as he hailed Trump for his visionary leadership, quote unquote, even saying, I'm quoting, "I think you are the man this world needs most at this point in time. The world will always remember you as a man who did everything, who went out of his way to stop 7 and today 8 wars," quote unquote. Those were his words. Clearly, the Pakistan Prime Minister is keen to court Trump's favor. But while Sharif was seen busy praising the American leader, Pakistan itself was burning. Over the weekend, dozens were killed in clashes at the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, the deadliest since the Taliban returned to power in Kabul in 2021. Pakistan's military reported 23 of its soldiers killed, while the Taliban said 9 of its fighters died. And the violence has not stopped. On Tuesday, a police officer guarding polio vaccinations in northwestern Pakistan was shot dead. And this comes on the second day of a nationwide drive to counter the rising polio cases there, in a country where the virus remains endemic. The attack was carried out by 2 unidentified gunmen on a motorcycle. Fortunately, the polio team was unharmed. No group has claimed responsibility so far. But the Pakistani Taliban, also called the Tehreek-e-Taliban, are considered the most active militant faction in the region. The polio situation is dire. Last year, Pakistan reported 74 cases, up from just 6 in 2023. This year, 29 cases have already been recorded, with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa witnessing the highest numbers. Polio is a highly infectious virus that mainly affects children under 5. And while it can cause lifelong paralysis, it is easily preventable with a few drops of an oral vaccine. Yet, misinformation about the vaccine, including claims it's a CIA plot to reduce Muslim populations, continues to do the rounds in rural Pakistan. Just a month ago, the government launched an HPV vaccination drive for girls, also plagued by misinformation. So here's the picture. Sharif is praising Trump for peace abroad, while at home, Pakistan faces deadly border clashes, militant attacks, a growing polio crisis, and misinformation that is causing widespread suffering in Pakistan. The contrast could not be starker. One leader, flattery-filled photo op, and a country still grappling with very real dangers. That's the reality of Pakistan today. And here's a quick look at what else is lined up for you on the show tonight. We are telling you all that you need to know about the winners of the Nobel Prize and what stood out this year. We also tell you how the US-China trade war is escalating with new port fees. All this and more coming up. The Nobel Peace Prize, the celebrated honor for peace, has often sparked debate and discussions. This year's honor went to the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Machado, for her non-violent fight against dictatorship. Machado's recognition coming decades after the man who defined non-violence itself, Mahatma Gandhi, was repeatedly denied the same honor. The architect of peaceful resistance, who reshaped the 20th century's idea of moral courage, never found a place among Nobel laureates. He was nominated 5 times. And this was in the years 1937, 1938, 1939, 1947, and finally in early 1948, just days before his assassination. Yet the prize never came. In 1947, in fact, Gandhi was on the shortlist, but 3 out of 5 committee members reportedly refused to support him, citing the political turmoil of India's partition. The award that year went instead to 2 Quaker organizations, the American Friends Service Committee and the British Friends Service Council, for their humanitarian work after the World Wars. When Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated in January 1948, 6 nominations had already been sent. Still, the Nobel Committee refused to make a posthumous award. That year, there was no award as the Norwegian Nobel Committee felt there was no suitable living candidate. That silence still echoes as one of the Nobel Committee's greatest omissions in a way. For decades, especially until the 1960s, the Nobel Peace Prize favored Europeans and Americans, it seems, leaving global icons like Mahatma Gandhi unrecognized, many would say. And history did not grow wiser. In 1991, Aung San Suu Kyi was awarded for her peaceful resistance. Later, she was criticized for her inaction during Myanmar's Rohingya crisis. In 2009, Barack Obama received the prize just months into office, an award he himself questioned. So when the Nobel Committee crowns these champions of peace, one cannot help but wonder if Gandhi's life of sacrifice, truth, non-violence was not peaceful enough according to them, then what truly defines peace for the Nobel Prize? From tariffs to tankers, the US-China trade war continues to escalate. On Tuesday, the US and China both started charging additional port fees on ocean shipping firms. And that move, everything from holiday toys to crude oil, making the high seas the next front in the trade war. It was only a matter of time. And just last week, remember, China announced a major expansion of its rare earth export controls. And US President Donald Trump threatened to raise tariffs on Chinese goods to triple digits. But after the weekend, both sides sought to reassure the traders and investors, which was seen as cooperation between their negotiating teams. And for a brief period, it looked like they could find a way forward. But then the tit-for-tat moves started. China sanctioned the American units of a South Korean shipping giant and threatened further retaliatory measures on the industry as Beijing and Washington jockey for leverage in a way before expected trade talks. But really, China's moves escalating a long-standing dispute with America over maritime dominance. Both sides have already slapped special port fees on each other's vessels, while the US has rallied allies, especially South Korea, to help it revive a moribund American shipbuilding industry. But this battle for dominance has implications for the global economy, as ships are responsible for moving more than 80% of the international trade. So in short, what this means is the broadening and expansion of the ongoing trade conflict. It's no longer just about tariffs or export controls, but which firms have the ability to operate in which markets. And if this continues, a lot more economic activity than shipping stands to be at risk, because shipping is just one point of contention here in the US-China relationship. Remember, Beijing has also tightened export controls on rare earths, among other measures, while the US has expanded curbs on China's access to chips and threatened the country with additional 100% tariffs. Even as officials from both sides have emphasized that they continue to talk, it's unclear whether they will actually be able to hash out a truce ahead of a summit where the two leaders of the two countries are expected to be speaking. One risk there for Xi Jinping is that China's latest measures on rare earths and shipping may prompt countries like South Korea to side with America in applying pressure on Beijing. For now, this trade war has locked both economies into a spiral of maritime taxation that risks distorting the entire global freight flows. While both Washington and Beijing say that the talks continue, these tit-for-tat measures showing there are still major obstacles. If the port fees, the sanctions, and the export controls continue, it could slow down trade, drive up the costs, and hit the one person who cannot escape it: you, the consumer. And that is why the US-China trade war is not just about politics anymore. It's about every package, every shipment, and every dollar that crosses the globe. And as the next round of talks and the summit also is lying ahead, the world will be watching, because whoever gains the advantage when it comes to shipping may just set the rules for global trade for years to come. In Guinea, a unique new circus school is offering disadvantaged youth a path away from poverty and delinquency. At this art center, young men and women are learning acrobatics, juggling, skills that are not only giving them hope, but also opening up doors to artistic careers around the world. Take a look.
It gives me a lot because when I'm here, I have hope. So it gives me a lot.
Quand je suis, il y a de l'espoir, quoi.
The aim of this school is to allow young people to be in a working environment that will prevent juvenile delinquency, banditry, and theft. That is the spirit.
We suffer so much here. That's why many young people leave to seek adventure.
France stands at a political crossroads. A embattled Prime Minister there minutes ago delivered a high-stakes speech to a deeply divided parliament just a day after the president accused opponents of plunging the country into chaos. At the center of the debate is Macron's controversial 2023 pension reforms. They raised the retirement age, remember, from 62 to 64. Under immense pressure from both the hard left and the far-right blocs, the Prime Minister told the French lawmakers that he supports suspending the pension reforms until the next presidential election in 2027. Listen to this first.
I will propose to Parliament this fall that we suspend the 2023 pension reform until the presidential election. No increase in the retirement age will take place from now until January 2028, as the CFDT had specifically requested. Additionally, the insurance period will also be suspended and will remain at 170 quarters until January 2028.
Jusqu'à janvier 2028.
The French Prime Minister's move is clearly aimed at winning over opposition backing, particularly from the Socialist MPs, a crucial bloc in a fractured parliament. The Socialists had threatened a vote of no confidence, remember, if the suspension was not guaranteed immediately. The Prime Minister was reappointed last week, only 4 days after he resigned, and he needs the support of the Socialist MPs in Parliament if his government is to survive. Announcing the decision on Tuesday, he was careful to stress that suspending for the sake of suspending makes no sense. He presented the suspension as an opportunity to chart a new path forward, proposing a working group to review the pension system, improve women's pensions, and address poor working conditions. He also warned that the suspension comes at a cost. 400 million in 2026 and 1.8 billion in 2027, which will need to be offset through savings rather than increasing the deficit. This conference will have time to reach a decision before the presidential election. That's what he told the MPs. And any conclusions would be put forward to a vote by the parliament, ensuring debate and democratic process. He also addressed concerns over taxation, acknowledging that anomalies may exist in taxing the country's wealthiest citizens.
The taxation of the very wealthy among our fellow citizens may have raised questions for some of you. Here too, we must acknowledge that anomalies can exist. We believe that achieving success through one's work is a good thing. We want a society where it is rewarding to work, to succeed, and to innovate.
France's political landscape remains rather fragile, to say the least. Reappointed just days after resigning, he now faces a divided parliament, looming no-confidence votes from both the far left and the far right, and the urgent task of passing a budget that reins in a deficit projected at 5.4% of the GDP. France's public debt at nearly 3.4 trillion, about 114% of economic output, is the third highest in the Eurozone, trailing only Greece and Italy. And the coming days will test whether the Prime Minister's strategy of the pension suspension, fiscal reform, and targeted taxation can actually hold his government together or plunge France into yet another round of political crisis. In a significant global health breakthrough, the Maldives has become the first country in the world to eliminate mother-to-child transmission of HIV, hepatitis B, earning a rare triple elimination recognition from the World Health Organization. And this marks a defining moment not only for the island nation, but also for the global fight against preventable childhood infections. The WHO's validation confirms that the Maldives has successfully stopped the spread of these deadly diseases from mothers to their babies, a feat that the WHO says was achieved through years of consistent investment in healthcare, vaccination, and maternal services. And the numbers also tell the story. More than 95% of pregnant women in the Maldives receive antenatal care and are screened for all three infections. Newborns receive timely hepatitis B vaccinations, ensuring protection from birth. As a result, no baby was born with the disease in 2022 and 2023. And a 2023 survey showed 0 hepatitis B infections among young children. According to the World Health Organization, this success rests on a strong public health system that provides free prenatal care, vaccinations, and diagnostic services for everyone, including migrant families. Health spending in the Maldives is around 10% of the national GDP, showing deep political commitment to healthcare. And the WHO has hailed this achievement as a global inspiration, a sign that with strong leadership and investment, according to them, diseases once considered unstoppable can indeed be defeated. The Maldives has proven that even a small island nation can set a global example like this by putting mothers, children, and public health at the very heart of national policy. China has made a move that could potentially change the future of modern warfare. The country says it has started mass producing a new kind of technology, an ultra-sensitive photon catcher that can detect the faintest traces of energy. And experts are saying it could spell the end of stealth aircraft as we know them. Beijing Science and Technology Daily reports that this device, officially called a 4-channel ultra-low noise single photon detector, can identify a single photon, the smallest particle of light. And this breakthrough is more than just scientific progress. It is strategic. By mass producing this detector, China claims it now leads the world in the core components of quantum information technology. And here's why this matters all the more. Traditional stealth jets, like America's F-22, for example, hide from radar by absorbing or deflecting radio waves. But quantum radar does not rely on those waves. Instead, it sends out photons. When those photons hit a stealth aircraft, their quantum state changes, something that cannot be deflected or hidden. And that means China's quantum radar could, in theory, spot even the most advanced stealth aircraft, breaking their invisibility advantage. So that's how crucial it is. And the new 4-channel detector reportedly also makes scanning faster and more accurate. It can receive photons from multiple light sources at once, creating clearer images and detecting signals that older systems would perhaps miss. The photon catcher may mark the dawn of a new military era, one where stealth technology no longer guarantees invisibility in the skies. High in Tajikistan's mountains, a team of international scientists drilling deep into ancient glaciers to unlock centuries of climate secrets. At an altitude of 5,800 meters, researchers have extracted ice cores from more than 100 meters below the surface, containing vital clues about the Earth's changing climate. Take a look. Let's now tell you how silver is suddenly stealing the spotlight. The white metal has jumped to its highest level in more than 4 decades, crossing $50 an ounce for the first time since 1980. That is nearly a 70% rise this year, far ahead of gold's 56% gain. From jewelry stores to trading floors, silver's record run has made it the best performing precious metal of 2025. What's driving this surge goes far beyond just investor excitement. It's a mix of industrial demand, shifting US policies, and a global supply crunch. Silver's rally is being powered by its dual role, basically. It's both a precious metal and a key industrial material. More than half of all silver produced today goes into industries shaping the future: solar panels, electric cars, electronics. And as the world races towards clean energy, silver has become indispensable. At the same time, supply is not keeping up. Mines cannot produce enough to match the growing demand. And that has created a global shortage for the 5th year in a row. Add to that the recent US interest rate cuts, which made metals more attractive to investors, and silver's rally gained even more momentum. Experts believe silver's story is far from over. They say the metal could continue to outshine gold in the next few years, thanks to booming demand from industries and a tight supply pipeline. The gap between gold and silver prices is closing fast, showing just how strong silver's rise has actually been. But there's also a word of caution here. Silver prices can swing sharply when global sentiment changes. Unlike gold, it does not have central banks backing it, which makes it more volatile. Still, with its rare mix of beauty, utility, scarcity, silver is fast becoming the new hot commodity in global markets. Shifting focus for now, Google is betting big on India. The tech giant has announced a massive $15 billion investment to build its biggest AI hub outside of the United States. The hub will be built in Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh. It will include a 1 gigawatt scale computer capacity data center, a new international subsea gateway, and large-scale energy infrastructure. India's Prime Minister spoke directly to the Google CEO to discuss this initiative today. Posting on social media after the interaction, Sundar Pichai said he was delighted to share the plans for the first ever Google AI hub in Visakhapatnam with the Prime Minister, and highlighted how the project will help accelerate AI innovation and support India's growing digital economy. Responding to Sundar Pichai's post, Prime Minister Modi welcomed the announcement as a transformative moment for India's AI ecosystem and stressed on how the investment aligns with the government's vision for India to become a global AI powerhouse. India is a critical growth market where nearly 1 billion users access the internet. The country has been increasingly attracting major multinational tech firms to invest in cloud and AI infrastructure. Microsoft and Amazon have already invested billions into building data centers. The announcement comes at a time when India-US diplomatic ties have been strained over tariffs levied by the Trump administration. Prime Minister Modi has frequently spoken about digital sovereignty and building indigenous technology capabilities. Recently, Indian ministers have been promoting apps and software made by Indian tech companies as viable alternatives to the so-called big tech. The Google investment will take place over the next 5 years. The infrastructure is expected to support India's rapidly growing AI computing demand. It's a Jurassic jackpot, if you may. Paleontologists in the UK have uncovered a network of nearly 200 dinosaur footprints in Oxfordshire, one of the longest trackways found anywhere in the world. Beneath layers of rock and mud, researchers have found dozens of dinosaur footprints, remarkably preserved from a time when the giant reptiles ruled the earth. The 220-meter trail, one of the longest continuous trackways ever found, offering rare insight into their life during the Middle Jurassic period. The tracks are believed to have been made by a species of sauropod dinosaur known as Cetiosaurus. They grew up to around 16 meters in length and lived around 171 to 165 million years ago in what is now Britain and France. While some of the tracks were left by massive sauropods, others belonged to the carnivorous Megalosaurus. Megalosaurus is originally named in 1824, being the world's first scientifically described dinosaur.
And we're the first people to see these. And also, it's just a really great experience to work on something in the UK of this size and scale. It's so rare to find something this big where you can get that picture into this past world.
Some trackways there were discovered in the 1990s. And last year, researchers found 200 huge footprints crisscrossing the floor. However, this year, the team unearthed even more tracks in a different part there. And paleontologists say controlled explosion helped them to excavate each sunken footprint beneath millions of years of limestone rock. While much of the surface remains unexplored, the footprints can answer questions about how the dinosaurs interacted. Were they alone? Were they in a herd? Were they being chased? Or simply just walking along? In a heartfelt tribute to the legendary star, Diane Keaton, who passed away on October 11 at the age of 79, theaters in the US have announced a special limited re-release of two of her most acclaimed films, the Oscar-winning Annie Hall and the romantic comedy hit Something's Gotta Give. The two iconic movies will be screened in approximately 100 cinemas across